tonight, you're not crawling through the trenches of the Great War or shivering in a plague doctor's mask on the streets of Renaissance Prague. No, your fate is lonelier, hungrier, and far more flammable. You're a moonshiner in the Appalachian mountains, crouched in a damp hollow with copper, corn mash, and the faint hope that no one is watching. Before we stoke the fire and wait for that first drop of burning liquor to fall, do me one small favour. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. If you'd prefer these stories without ads, you can join the Patreon. It's linked in the description. And if you want the ultimate immersive experience, consider using a pair of wireless earbuds. I've linked my favourite pair in the description. They're comfortable, discreet, and designed so you can wear them even while sleeping. Now, lie back, get comfortable, let's begin. The Appalachian backcountry has a way of holding you fast, as though the mountains themselves press a hand on your shoulder and refuse to let go. The ridges rise like walls, green in summer, skeletal and grey in winter, always looming in the corner of your vision. The hollows run deep and damp, shaded even at midday, full of the smells of rotting leaves and wet stone. You live in one of those folds, a few acres scratched into stubborn soil that yields little more than corn and potatoes. The land is stingy, and so are the seasons. Every harvest is a gamble between blight, frost, and sheer exhaustion, and when the bushels are weighed, they are never quite enough. Hunger is not a distant threat here. It is a guest that lingers at the table, uninvited but never chased away. Coin is rarer than daylight in these hills. The nearest town lies miles of rough track away, and even there your pockets would find little comfort. What trade you manage, corn for salt, potatoes for calico, leaves you with nothing left to spend. Taxes arrive all the same, demanded by officials you seldom see. The law feels as far away as Washington, and yet somehow closer than your own kin. Men with badges or papers drift through from time to time. Their boots polished, their eyes narrow, their hands greedy. They do not understand the silence of the hollers or the desperation of thin soil, but they know how to threaten and collect. Authority here is a phantom that steals what little you have, all the while insisting it exists for your benefit. In the evenings you sit by the fire and count what remains. A sack of cornmeal, half a side of smoked pork, a jug of buttermilk, if you're lucky. Your family's eyes are tired, their bellies uncertain. Neighbours fare no better. Their fields too lie fallow or flooded. Their animals lean. It is not comfort you seek, only survival, and even that seems like a prize reserved for wealthier men on flatter lands. You hear of merchants in town with shelves lined with flour, bolts of cloth, jars of coffee, but such things are distant luxuries. You live in a place where even sugar is a rare treasure, and where your children learn young that desire is wasted energy. The mountains, however, do provide one thing. Corn grows stubbornly in the thin soil. Not as much as you need, but enough to consider. It does not store well through wet winters, not without rats and mould eating their share, and hauling sacks down to town costs more in time and wear than it earns in trade. But corn, when crushed, soaked and heated, becomes something else entirely, something more valuable, more durable, more dangerous. You have tasted it before, harsh and burning, leaving a trail of fire from throat to gut. It is not pleasant, but it is powerful, and in these hills power is the only currency that matters. A gallon jug of whiskey will trade for coffee, for shoes, for a doctor when fever strikes, for a box of cartridges when hunting is poor. Corn in a jar is worth 10 times what corn in a sack could ever fetch. You have seen it done. Older men in the hollow vanish into the woods for days at a time and return with jars hidden under their coats. They sell quiet, in whispers, or sometimes not at all, simply trading with neighbours who need and cannot pay otherwise. You have watched the way a man's fortune can turn with one run of liquor, debts paid, supplies bought, winter endured. You have also watched the way suspicion trails him, how the wrong whisper at the wrong time brings revenuers stomping up the creek bed, their guns slung, their eyes eager, but envy gnaws harder than fear. You think of the fields, the ache in your back, the endless cycles of hunger, and you find yourself staring into the fire with a thought that will not leave. There must be more than this. The nights in the holler are long, the whip-poor-wills call, the crickets drone, and the trees creak as though the whole mountain is listening. In those hours you lie awake, smelling the damp wood of the cabin and hearing the soft breathing of your kin. You imagine jars stacked in the corner, hidden under burlap. You imagine coins laid in a tin box, heavy enough to buy not only what you need, but what you might want for once. A decent coat against the frost, a pair of boots that does not leak at the seams, maybe even a lamp that burns longer than the stub of tallow you scrape at now. Dreams are dangerous things in these hills, but they come unbidden, fed by hunger and by pride. It is not freedom you crave so much as the illusion of control. Farming ties you to weather and soil, taxes tie you to faceless officials, but liquor is something you might hold in your own hands. It requires only your labour, your nerve, and the silence of the woods. Yet even as the thought grows, so does the shadow of consequence. You have heard stories of men blinded by bad whiskey, their eyes clouded forever by wood alcohol gone wrong. Others have been burned alive when stills exploded, the copper rupturing and fire-swallowing shack, and flesh alike. And then there are the arrests, the humiliations, the men hauled away in chains while their families watch. The mountains are full of such stories, repeated in hushed tones as warnings, yet the warnings always carry a trace of awe. Even ruin has a certain dignity when it comes from trying to grasp a little more than subsistence. The choice creeps slowly rather than arriving at once. First, it is only a passing idea, something to wonder about while chopping wood. Then it becomes a question, whispered to yourself while walking the creek bed. Finally, it becomes a necessity, pressed on you by hunger, by the sight of your children with ribs too sharp, by the gnawing certainty that no one will save you but yourself. You look at the corn in the bin, more than you can eat, less than you can sell, and you know what it might become. You look at the hills, deep and secret, and you know what they might hide. And you look at your own hands, calloused and cracked, and you know what they might build. Yes, you tell yourself, it can be done. The copper is scarce, but not impossible. Barrels can be borrowed or stolen. The woods are wide enough to conceal a shack, if you choose carefully and keep your tongue still. Others have done it, others still are doing it. And if you are clever, you might avoid their mistakes. The fear is real, the risk undeniable, but the alternative is slow starvation, and that choice has already been made for you. Better to wager against fire and prison than to sit idle while hunger wins again. The fire on the hearth sinks low, glowing faintly against the damp of the room. You rise, step outside into the night, and breathe the heavy air of the hollow. The trees drip with condensation. The soil smells of rot and stone, and the ridges loom like watchmen. You stand there for a long while, listening, and in that silence the decision settles like a stone in your gut. You will not wait for rescue. You will not watch the corn rot and the children shrink. You will turn grain into fire and gamble that the flames do not consume you first. Tomorrow, you will begin to build a still. You tell no one, of course. Even your family, whose bellies gnaw with hunger, must be kept in the dark. The fewer words spoken, the safer you remain. Silence is your first tool, sharper than any knife, and you wield it carefully. But silence does not fetch copper, nor does it roll barrels across uneven ground. That is work only your own back can carry, and the hills do not forgive weakness. Copper is the most difficult prize, gleaming and scarce in these parts. You know of a peddler in town who keeps odds and ends, scraps from roofing jobs, bent pipes salvaged from cabins that collapsed under snow. The cost is ruinous, more than you should risk, but you part with what coin you have and walk away with metal too green and thin in places. It will have to do. Barrels are easier, a gift from neighbours who think only that you plan to salt meat. An old iron kettle comes from the corner of your own cabin, dented and soot black, but serviceable. Every piece feels like a betrayal of necessity, stolen from tasks already hard to keep. Yet you gather them all, hoisting and dragging through mud and stone, your body bent double beneath their awkward weight. The place must be chosen with care. You wander the hollers, boots sinking into moss, eyes measuring distance and concealment. Too close to a path and you risk discovery, too deep in the brush, and you cannot haul wood or water. At last you find it, a gulch where the earth dips low, hidden by laurel thickets and guarded by the steady trickle of a stream. The air there feels close, damp as breath against skin, but it will serve. The sound of running water masks the noise of your labour, and the slope above offers cover thick enough to hide smoke if you keep the fire small. It is not perfect, no place ever is, but it promises secrecy, and secrecy is survival. The first trip down into that gulch is punishing. You drag the barrel behind you, slipping on leaves slick with rot, stumbling over roots that clutch at your boots. Each thud of wood against stone seems louder than a gunshot. You pause often, straining to hear if anyone follows, though the forest yields nothing but the distant croak of crows. Sweat pours down your back, soaking your shirt, stinging your eyes. By the time the barrel rests against the stream bank, your arms tremble and your chest burns with every breath. You sit for a long moment, staring at it, knowing you must repeat this journey again and again until every piece of the still is hidden here. Copper comes next. The weight of it digs into your shoulder, the edges biting even through cloth, the tang of the metal sharp in your nostrils. Each step is measured, each turn of the path chosen with care, for a stumble would send you sprawling with a clatter that might carry for miles. You curse under your breath, half prayer, half condemnation, as you slide down into the gulch with your burden. There you lay it beside the barrel, the two of them like conspirators awaiting your command. Days stretch into weeks as you ferry each part. Old pipes, scavenged boards, the kettle blackened with years of meals. Every trip is a risk, every absence from the cabin a chance for questions you cannot answer. Your wife asks why you spend so many hours in the woods, and you mutter something about hunting or checking the lines, though you bring home little enough meat to prove it. The children watch you go with wide eyes, uncomprehending, but they do not speak. They have learned, as all must hear, that silence is safest. You carry their hunger with you into the gulch, and it lends strength when your arms falter. At last comes the work of shaping it. You set the barrel upright, fit the pipes as best you can, hammer nails into soft wood until your fingers swell. The tools you own are blunt and stubborn, more suited to mending fences than coaxing metal into shape, but you use them anyway. Sparks fly as you solder joints, the acrid smoke rising into your face. You cough until your lungs ache, eyes streaming, the copper tang clinging to your mouth as though you've swallowed a coin. The joints do not sit flush, the seals ooze and hiss, but you smear them with flour paste and pray they will hold. Your hands blister, your back stiffens, but still you work, driven by hunger more than ambition. Each sound feels magnified. The creak of a branch overhead, the splash of a stone in the stream, the rustle of a squirrel in the undergrowth. Each one makes you freeze, heart pounding, certain that revenuers or rivals are crouched nearby, watching. You force yourself to move again, to strike another blow, to bind another seam, all the while listening for footsteps that never come. The forest is thick with eyes, whether of man or beast, and you feel them on you constantly, a weight heavier than the copper you drag. Evenings you limp home, hands black with soot, clothes soaked with sweat and mud. Your wife frowns at the state of you, but says nothing, only ladles thin stew into a bowl and sets it before you. The children crowd near, hoping for stories of hunting or fishing, but you have none to give. You eat in silence, every bite tasting of metal and smoke, every glance at their gaunt faces reminding you why you persist. When they sleep, you sit by the hearth and stare at the flames, replaying the day's labour in your mind, tallying each weakness, each gap that might betray you. The firelight gleams on your knuckles, raw and split, and you wonder how much more of yourself you can sacrifice to make this thing stand. Yet slowly, piece by stubborn piece, the shape emerges. The barrel rests solid, the pipes curve awkwardly but hold, the kettle squats heavy at the heart of it all. You test the seals, hear the faint hiss of steam where none should be, patch and bind again. Each day you swear the thing will never work, and each day it looks a little more like the still you imagined. It is crude, clumsy, and fragile, but it is real, and it is yours. You crouch beside it, tracing the lines of copper with a trembling hand, tasting again that metallic tang at the back of your throat. When the last joint is sealed and the final board nailed in place, you sit back on your heels and let out a breath you did not know you were holding. The still stands crooked in the gulch, crude and precarious, but you know it is time to test it. Days of scraping metal and patching seams have led to this moment, and now the real risk begins. A still is no silent companion. It breathes, it hisses, it complains with every pulse of steam, and you will have to coax it as carefully as if it were a sick child. You haul sacks of cornmeal down into the hollow, your shoulders aching beneath their weight, and you know that this grain will not be eaten now. It is a gamble, food transformed into something that might keep you alive in another way, or might betray you entirely. The barrel yawns open as you pour in the mash, a foul blend of corn, water, and yeast that froths and bubbles with a life of its own. The smell rises immediately, sour and rank, clinging to your hair and skin, sinking into your clothes until you know your wife will wrinkle her nose when you come home. But there is no help for it. Whiskey does not grow politely. It festers, it rots, and you must endure the stench if you are to taste the profit. You spend days watching the mash swell and churn, returning again and again to check its progress. The shack you have built over the still is hardly more than 4 walls and a roof of scavenged planks, a shield against rain and eyes, but not against smell. The sour stink fills the hollow, warning away animals, and perhaps men too, though you know that any experienced revenuer or rival will recognize it immediately. Each time you enter, you breathe shallow, but the reek seems to crawl into your nostrils no matter how tightly you clamp your mouth. You stir the mash with a length of wood, watching bubbles rise, listening to the faint hiss as the yeast eats and belches. It feels like tending a fire that is not yours, one that burns cold but steady, and you find yourself speaking to it in low mutters, as though your voice could hurry or calm it. At night you carry the stench back to your cabin. The children pull away slightly when you stoop to kiss their heads, and your wife frowns as she hangs your clothes by the fire, but she does not ask questions. The silence between you is heavy but necessary. She must know, or at least suspect, what you're doing, but suspicion without words is safer than certainty. You eat your stew and bread in quiet, tasting mash at the back of your throat, wondering if the neighbours can smell it too when the wind blows from the south. The thought keeps you restless, shifting on your cot, ears straining for the sound of dogs barking in the distance. When at last the mash is ready, you rise before dawn and carry kindling down to the shack. The forest is damp with dew, the leaves heavy, the ground soft beneath your boots, and you pray that the smoke will rise no higher than the trees. Inside the shack you crouch low, your movements slow and deliberate, and begin to set the fire. The wood crackles reluctantly, and you fan it carefully, coaxing the flames to lick at the iron kettle. You know too well the danger now. Fire is your servant only so long as you bow to its temper. One spark in the wrong place, and the shack will become your coffin, and your family will be left with nothing but smoke and ashes to remember you by. The copper creaks as it warms, the seams oozing flour paste, the pipes trembling faintly as steam begins to curl. You crouch beside it, your eyes stinging, your breath shallow, listening for the signs of failure. A hiss too loud, a crack too sharp, and you will have to run. But for now, the still holds, groaning like an old man in his sleep, complaining but enduring. The smell changes gradually. The sour stench of mash thickens, sharpens, until it bites at the back of your throat. You wipe sweat from your brow with a sleeve already damp, your heart hammering as though it too is tied to the kettle. Each minute feels stretched. The silence between drips louder than thunder. Time drags in that shack. You sit on a rough stool, eyes fixed on the copper, ears straining for the faintest betrayal. Outside, the stream chatters on, indifferent, birds calling to one another, as if the world were not holding its breath with you. Your hands shake though the air is still, and you clutch your knees until they ache. This is not farming, not chopping wood, not the work of honest daylight. This is theft, defiance, and alchemy, turning corn into liquor, turning hunger into risk. You feel the weight of it pressing against your chest, and still you wait. Lips cracked, throat dry, every sense narrowed to the still. And then it comes. A sound so small it might be missed, a faint plink against glass. You lean forward, breath caught, and see it. A thin trickle sliding down the pipe, clear as water, but far more dangerous. It gathers, drips, splashes into the waiting jar with a rhythm both maddening and miraculous. You laugh, though the sound comes out strangled, and lift the jar slightly to catch the flow. The smell is sharp, eye-watering, carrying with it both promise and poison. You watch as the liquid rises slowly, bead by bead, until the bottom glistens with a thin layer. Victory, you think, though the word feels fragile in your mouth. You let it run, tending the fire with trembling hands, shifting wood to keep the flame steady, praying the copper does not betray you. Each jar fills painfully slow, the drips measuring out time like a cruel clock. You know better than to drink freely. The first run is dangerous, laced with poison that blinds and kills. You set aside the earliest drops, grimacing at the thought of what they could do if swallowed, and only when the flow steadies do you dare to lift the jar to your lips. The glass is warm, slick with condensation, and the smell is enough to twist your stomach, but you tilt it anyway. The liquid burns the moment it touches your tongue, searing a path down your throat, filling your chest with fire. You cough, eyes watering, your breath caught in your lungs, and for a moment you wonder if you have poisoned yourself, after all. But then the fire settles into a dull warmth, spreading slowly through your belly, and you laugh again, this time hoarse but real. It is harsh, raw, enough to strip paint from wood, but it is whiskey, and it is yours. You stare at the jar as though it were a newborn child, ugly and perfect in the same breath. You taste both victory and poison on your lips, and you know that nothing will ever be simple again. The whiskey cools in glass jars lined against the wall of your shack, each one cloudy and sharp with a smell that seeps into your clothes. They look harmless stacked there, as though they were filled with nothing more than water or vinegar, but you know how heavy they are with risk. A single jar is enough to draw the attention of a neighbour or an agent, enough to turn silence into accusation. Still, jars will not feed your family by themselves. Corn transformed into whiskey is only the first half of survival. Now you must move it into hands that will pay, and that is the harder part. The first sale comes quietly. A neighbour, a man whose farm yields no more than yours, lingers at the edge of your yard and speaks low about his cousin's wedding. He says the men will want something to drink, something stronger than water, and that he's heard you might know where such a thing could be found. His eyes do not meet yours, but his meaning is plain. You do not answer at once. Every word you speak feels like a noose tightening, and you know that once you agree, there is no return to innocence. But the children sit by the hearth inside, their bellies thin and their eyes sharp, and so at last you nod. A price is named, a jar is passed, and coins slide into your palm with a clink that feels louder than thunder. That night, you sleep less than an hour, certain that your door will be broken down before dawn. But when the sun rises, the world is unchanged. From then on, the rhythm takes shape. The jars never travel openly. You tuck them into sacks of cornmeal, bury them beneath onions or potatoes, disguise them as though they were only another burden carried down the trail. Sometimes you hide them in the straw of a wagon bed, other times in the folds of a ragged coat. The drop is never the same twice: a barn on the far side of a creek, a crossroads where the road forks like a wishbone, an abandoned cabin where the roof has caved but the walls still stand. Always you move under cover of night or early dawn, when fog lingers low and voices carry less far. Always your eyes search the trees, your ears straining for the sound of dogs or boots. Each sale brings relief and dread in equal measure. The coins feel real heavy, as though they might secure your survival for another week, another month. Yet each exchange also feels like a door closing behind you. The men who buy from you are familiar. Neighbours, cousins, men you see at church. But once whiskey is involved, trust becomes slippery. They smile, they laugh, they shake your hand, but you know how quickly hunger or fear can turn a friend into a traitor. You keep your words short, your eyes down, and your pistol within reach, though you pray never to use it. The silence of the holler is louder than conversation, and it follows you home long after the jars are gone. The family learns the pattern too. Your wife says nothing when you return late with mud on your boots and your coat sagging from hidden weight. The children watch, curious, but they know better than to ask. In their silence, there is complicity, and in that complicity, danger. You wonder how long they can hold their tongues if others ask questions, and the thought keeps you awake, listening to the creak of the cabin walls. You have not only taken on risk yourself, you have brought it into your home, set it beside the hearth, and asked everyone you love to sit quietly beside it. The money helps, though never enough. A few bills buy flour, coffee, maybe shoes for the eldest child, whose feet bleed through broken leather. But coin melts faster than ice, and what one jar brings is soon gone. There is always another debt, another need, another hand outstretched. You sell again, and again, until the rhythm becomes a drumbeat that governs your days. Gather corn, fire the still, hide the jars, walk the paths, pass the bills, return to the woods. There is no pause, no rest, only repetition, and with repetition comes weariness that no sleep can heal. You learn to watch men differently now. At church, when heads bow in prayer, you look at their hands and wonder which of them have touched your jars. At the store, when voices rise in gossip, you wonder if your name sits on their tongues, ready to be whispered into the wrong ear. Even kin are not exempt. Cousins who once shared your bread now seem to watch too closely, their questions too pointed, their smiles too eager. Every handshake carries the weight of betrayal, and you feel it like a splinter lodged in the flesh. The whiskey may buy survival, but it sells peace of mind, and you're not sure if that is a trade worth making. Still, you continue. To stop now would be to admit defeat, to return to hunger with nothing to show for the risk already taken. So you walk the trails with jars wrapped in burlap, your steps cautious, your breath shallow. The woods seem to lean closer each time, as though listening to the clink of glass, the rustle of straw. A crow's cry startles you into stillness. A deer's rustle sends your hand to the pistol at your belt. The forest is full of enemies even if no man is there, and you carry the weight of unseen eyes with every step. The first coins feel like victory, but word of whiskey has a way of moving faster than smoke in the mountains. A neighbour whispers to another, a cousin brags at a barn dance, a stranger in town hears of jars for sale at a fair price. It is never you they name outright, but in a place where everyone knows everyone's business, no secret remains truly hidden. Whispers rise like fog, clinging to branches, seeping into cabins, settling in places you would rather they did not. And with whispers come the men who listen for them, the ones paid to find you. They wear the title of revenuer, and while most live beyond these hills, they return often enough to remind you that the federal government has long arms and longer patience. Revenuers do not announce themselves. They arrive on silent boots, rifles slung across their shoulders, badges tucked inside coats, until the moment they must be shown. They know these hills almost as well as you do, or else they bring with them locals who have sold their silence for a share of the reward. It is not the agents you fear so much as the men who guide them, neighbours who smile at you in daylight and then point to your still in the dark. You do not know who they are until it is too late, until dogs bark down the valley and the crack of an axe splits your door. It is paranoia by design, and it works well. You begin to watch every man's eyes more carefully, searching for the flicker that might mean betrayal. Their presence forces you into motion. A still cannot remain in one place long enough to grow roots. Each time a whisper carries too far, each time you notice a stranger's boot print on the road, you know it is time to tear down what you have built. The copper must be carried away, the barrels emptied or buried, the shack abandoned to rot. Then begins the work of building again in another gulch, another fold of land, always deeper, always harder to reach. It is back-breaking labour, made worse by the knowledge that you may be forced to repeat it again before the month is out. You live like a hunted animal, never resting, always shifting your den. At night the fear sharpens. You lie in your cabin, the fire guttering low, listening for twigs snapping in the dark. Every gust of wind sounds like footsteps, every creak of the wall like a hand at the door. The dogs bark and you jolt upright, heart hammering, pistol clutched in your hand. Sometimes it is only a raccoon, sometimes only the wind itself, but you do not sleep again until the first light of dawn seeps over the ridges. Your wife stirs beside you, weary with the same dread, and though she never speaks the words, her silence asks the question plainly enough. How long can this continue before it consumes us all? You have no answer, only the same grim resolve to endure one more day. The revenuers are patient men. They do not need to rush, for they know the whiskey will come to them in time. They let the rumours build, let the jars circulate, then follow the trail back to its source. When they strike hard, tearing through cabins, smashing stills, hauling men away in chains. You hear stories of neighbours caught unawares, of families left destitute after the head of the house was led down the road by agents. The tale spread faster than scripture, serving as both warning and intimidation. You tell yourself you will not be so careless, that your eyes are sharp, your ears keen, but doubt is a constant weight. Even the most careful man can be betrayed by a loose word or a single misstep. You try to outthink them, to become as invisible as the mist. You move your still farther into the hills, choosing hollows so deep even deer hesitate to wander them. You make your fires small, feeding them with damp wood so the smoke clings low and drifts sideways along the ridge. You travel by night when you can, walking barefoot along creek beds to hide your tracks. The still itself becomes smaller, easier to dismantle, each piece light enough to carry if you must scatter at a moment's notice. You trade speed for output, knowing that fewer jars mean less suspicion, even if it also means fewer coins. It is a miserable compromise, but one that lets you cling to survival a little longer. Even so, the fear seeps into every part of life. At church, you watch the door instead of the preacher, half expecting strangers to step inside and fix their eyes on you. At markets, you count the coins too quickly, anxious that someone will notice the sudden presence of money you should not have. At home, you pace the cabin long after your family has fallen asleep, unable to quiet the buzzing in your mind. The children feel the tension too, though they cannot name it. They play less, laugh less, their eyes flicking toward the door each time a sound rises outside. Your wife speaks little, her silence heavy with unasked questions, and you cannot bring yourself to give her the answers she already fears. Sometimes you wonder if the revenuers truly stalk you at all, or if it is only your own guilt walking beside you. Perhaps no one has spoken your name. Perhaps the footsteps you imagine are only your own echoes. But then you hear the distant baying of dogs on the next ridge, or catch the glint of metal on a man's hip in town, and you know the threat is real. You are not the first to run liquor through these hills, nor will you be the last, but each man believes he will be the clever one who slips between the cracks. And each man tells himself that until the day the door breaks down. The still becomes both your salvation and your curse. You tend it as though it were a member of the family, feeding it, guarding it, moving it when necessary. Yet it offers no loyalty in return, only the chance of profit laced with danger. Each time you light the fire, you wonder if the smoke will carry further than you can see, if the steam will betray you, if the sound of dripping liquor will be the lure that draws men into the hollow. You listen constantly for the forest to speak, for the crack of a branch underfoot, for the mutter of voices hidden by trees. You begin to hear these sounds, even when they are not there, your own heartbeat drowning out reason. One afternoon you make the long walk back to the gulch, intent on checking the seals and barrels before nightfall. The path is quiet, the birds subdued, the air heavy with the damp of recent rain. You crouch low as you near the shack, your body moving with the instinct of a man who knows danger is close. At first nothing seems amiss, the still sitting crooked as you left it, the stream murmuring its steady song. Then your eyes drop to the ground and freeze. In the soft mud at the edge of the shack, clear as writing on a page, are footprints. Not yours, not your wife's, not any you recognize. The heel is sharp, the tread unfamiliar, and the prints are fresh. You stare at them until your throat dries, the forest pressing close, the silence heavier than stone. Someone has been here. You crouch in the mud staring at those unfamiliar footprints by the shack, the silence of the forest pressing harder against your ears. For days afterward, you live as if someone is watching from the trees, your nerves tight, your movements cautious, your sleep restless. But even as you wait for men with badges to appear, you realize the still itself is no less dangerous than those who hunt for it. A revenuer may arrive tomorrow or not at all, but the copper waits for you each night, temperamental and unforgiving, ready to betray you with fire if you misstep by so much as a breath. The still is a fickle machine, never entirely yours no matter how many hours you spend bending over it. Copper and wood do not obey like soil and plough. They resist, complain, betray you without warning. You learn quickly that whiskey is not made so much as negotiated, each run a tense bargain between you, the fire, and the metal that sweats under your hands. A barrel of mash might promise profit, but a barrel of mash does not care if it carries you to ruin. Every joint in the copper is a weak seam, every pipe a mouth waiting to hiss poison, Every flicker of flame beneath the kettle, a reminder that the difference between success and death is thinner than paper. You hear stories carried on the wind, tales of men you know by name or kinship who went to light a fire and never walked out again. A cousin in the next valley, a friend of your father's, men who thought themselves careful until a single leak sprayed alcohol vapor into the air. One spark, one careless match, and the shack became a furnace. Wood walls feeding the blaze until nothing remained but blackened beams and a body too charred to carry home. Skin sloughed like wax, hair burned to cinders, teeth grinning through ash where a face once was. You tell yourself you're more cautious, more patient, but caution is a thin shield when the air itself can ignite around you. The danger is always present, lingering like a smell you cannot scrub away. When you smear flour paste across a joint to seal it, your hands tremble though you try to hold them steady. The paste bubbles, hisses and hardens, but never fully hides the whisper of vapor beneath. You lean close, your eyes watering from the sting, pressing your ear to the copper to listen for the faintest hiss. If it escapes your notice, the next breath you take could be your last. The children's laughter at the cabin feels far away in those moments, as though you stand already half in the grave, waiting to learn if the earth will open under you. Some days you think the still itself resents you. It groans when the fire grows hot, it shudders when the pressure builds, and the pipes rattle like bones clattering in a sack. You tap them with the back of your knuckles, whisper curses, patch again and again. The tools you have are crude, the copper already thin in places, the wood damp and warping from the mountain air. Nothing here was built to last. Every run feels like coaxing a tired mule over a crumbling bridge. Possible if you're gentle, fatal if you press too hard. You know men who take pride in their stills, who polish the copper until it shines and brag of runs so clean the liquor burns sweet on the tongue. But you have no such luxury. Yours is a thing of patched seams and mismatched parts, held together with flour, prayer, and stubbornness. The liquor it produces is harsh, clouded, sometimes dangerous in its own right, but it is all you have, and it is better than the slow wasting that hunger brings. You drink none yourself beyond the cautious sip, knowing too well how easily blindness or madness can creep from a bad batch. Instead, you sell what you can, hiding your fear behind the same grim mask you wear for every other task. The memory of other men's deaths clings to you even as you light your own fires. You picture them in the instant before the blast, eyes wide, lungs filling with flame, skin melting in folds. You imagine their screams echoing through the holler, carried to families who could only watch the smoke rise. It is not an image that fades. Sometimes when you wake in the night, sweating beneath your blanket, you smell the acrid tang of burned hair, though the cabin is quiet and whole. You sit up, clutching your chest, listening for crackling flames that are not there. The revenuer may be patient, the neighbour may betray you, but the still itself is your most constant enemy, always at your side, always waiting to turn on you. Yet you persist because what else is there? You patch and paste, scrape and solder, your fingers raw, your lungs filled with the sour reek of mash and smoke. Each run is another wager, another night spent crouched in the shack with your ears ringing and your body taut as wire. You keep water nearby, a bucket filled from the stream, though you know in truth it would do little against an inferno. The gesture is symbolic at best, a way to trick yourself into believing you have some defense. The reality is simpler. If the still chooses to betray you, there is nothing you can do but die quickly. The forest seems to know your peril. Owls call low and mournful, frogs fall silent when the fire cracks too sharply. Deer crash away through undergrowth, as if fleeing something they can sense but you cannot. The night presses close around your shack, listening, waiting. You think of your wife asleep with the children in the cabin, unaware of how close you walk to the edge each time. You imagine her waking to the smell of smoke on the wind, running barefoot to the gulch only to find ash. You wonder if she would curse you for the risk or weep for the necessity, and you suspect it would be both. One night, when the air hangs heavy and still, you nearly meet the same fate as the men whose stories haunt you. The mash is running hotter than you intended, bubbling furiously, the steam thick against your skin. You crouch low to adjust the fire, sweat pouring down your face when a joint in the copper gives a sharp hiss. At first you think it's only the usual complaint, another seam loosening, but then a thin jet of vapour spits into the air, sharp as a knife. The smell is instant and overwhelming, raw alcohol filling your nose, burning your eyes. Panic claws at you as you scramble for the bucket, splashing paste across the seam with trembling hands. The hiss grows louder, the vapour curling like smoke, and in that instant, you know the shack could ignite with a single spark. Your lungs seize as the vapour thickens. Each breath scalds, tearing down your throat, leaving you coughing and gasping. The fire snaps beneath the kettle, bright and hungry, licking close to where the leak sprays invisible fuel into the air. You stagger backward, eyes watering, arms flailing against the sting. The shack swirls in haze, shadows warping, wood beams creaking as though already preparing to collapse in flame. You think of the cousin, burned alive, of the teeth grinning through ash, and you know you are a heartbeat away from joining him. With hands that barely obey you, you grab a rag and smear paste hard against the seam, pressing until your fingers ache, holding it there as if you could strangle the danger into silence. The hiss falters, sputters, then fades to a faint whisper. The air still reeks, your lungs still scream, but the threat ebbs, just enough for you to stumble toward the door. You burst into the night, collapsing on damp earth, sucking in cold air as though it were salvation itself. Each breath tears raw and ragged, smoke clinging in your chest like thorns. You lie there for long minutes, staring at the stars through streaming eyes, your body trembling with the knowledge of how near the fire came to claiming you. The shack behind you creaks, still intact, the still groaning like a beast not yet sated. You push yourself upright, your chest burning, and wipe soot from your face with a shaking hand. You have escaped for now, lungs scorched with smoke but body whole, yet you know the reprieve is temporary. The still will betray you again, tomorrow or the day after, and one day your luck will not hold. The near fire lingers with you long after the smoke has cleared from your lungs. Each time you strike a match now, you hear again the hiss of vapour, feel the scorch in your chest, and see the shack glowing in your imagination like a pyre waiting to catch. You have survived the revenuer's shadow, survived the still's betrayal, but survival demands its own price. You find yourself speaking less, watching more, shrinking the circle of your life to something tighter than it once was. Secrecy is no longer just a habit. It is the air you breathe, thick and unrelenting. Neighbours drift by on occasion, as they always have. A man might wander up your path to ask about borrowing a tool, or a woman might pause on her way to the spring to exchange gossip. Their words are simple, but each one feels like a hook, barbed and dangerous. When they ask after your crops, you give only a short nod. When they comment on your long hours in the woods, you shrug and mention hunting. You sense their eyes lingering too long on your face, as if they can smell the sour mash clinging to your skin, as if they are waiting for you to slip and say too much. Once you might have sat with them, traded stories, laughed around a table. Now you find excuses to end conversations quickly, your voice low, your gaze drifting toward the trees, where you imagine unseen listeners crouching. At church you feel the strain more sharply. The wooden pews creak under the weight of neighbours, kin, and strangers alike. The preacher's words about sin and redemption rising through the rafters. You bow your head with the others, but your prayers are hollow, your thoughts caught instead on the possibility that the man in the next row has spoken your name to an agent, or that the woman across the aisle has heard of jars changing hands. Fellowship was once the centre of your week, the only reprieve from labour, but now you sit in silence, offering only curt nods to greetings, keeping your hands folded tight in your lap. The hymns ring out, voices joining, but you do not sing. You fear that if you opened your mouth, the only sound to escape would be confession. Even within your family, the silence grows. Your wife no longer asks where you go when you vanish before dawn or after supper. She stirs the pot, folds the clothes, tends the children, her eyes downcast, her lips pressed tight. The children, too, have learned the unspoken rules. They no longer run to you with questions, no longer chatter freely about what they've seen. Instead, they watch you with wide eyes, curious but quiet, as though afraid their words might betray you. The cabin feels full of unspoken weight, every creak of the floorboards, another reminder that walls have ears. You wanted this for them, for their safety, for their survival, but you cannot help but notice how much smaller their laughter has become, how quickly they glance at the door each time a dog barks down the valley. Suspicion becomes a second skin, one you cannot peel away no matter how you try. You mark the faces of every man who lingers too long in conversation, the sound of every unfamiliar step on the path, the glint of every eye that seems too interested in your comings and goings. When a cousin offers to help carry wood, you thank him but decline, unwilling to let him near the gulch. When a neighbour asks about trading corn, you insist you have none to spare, though your barrel is half full. Even kin, bound by blood, feel like dangers waiting to be revealed. You walk among them as though they're all holding knives, their blades hidden in their smiles. The paranoia stretches into the night. You lie awake in the cabin, listening for sounds beyond the walls. The children's breathing is steady. Your wife sighs soft in her sleep, but your ears strain for twigs snapping outside, for voices muffled in the dark. Each creak of the roof makes you sit up, hand clutching the pistol by the bed. Sometimes you light the lantern and peer through the cracks in the wall, certain you will see movement. The yard is always empty, the trees still, the path quiet, yet the dread does not ease. You lie back down, staring at the rafters, wondering if the silence outside is only the patience of men waiting for you to close your eyes. You begin to speak less even to yourself. The words that once filled your head, plans for the next run, worries about the revenuer, thoughts of how to patch the still, become quieter, drowned beneath the constant hum of suspicion. It is not that you think less, but that your thoughts grow sharper, narrower, like a knife honed to a point too fine for comfort. You weigh every sound, every glance, every word spoken around you, passing them for hidden meaning. It is exhausting, yet you cannot stop. To let down your guard, even for a moment, feels like an invitation to ruin. The children sense it. They still climb into your lap on occasion, still tug at your sleeve when they want your attention, but even then they are quiet. They lean against you in silence, staring into the fire, and you feel the distance you have built between you, a wall not of malice but of necessity. You wonder if they will remember you as a man of few words, or if they will one day understand that your silence was not for yourself, but for them. You wonder too if the price of that silence will be a family that forgets the sound of your voice. On the rare evenings when neighbours gather at another's cabin, you sometimes accompany your family, though the visits bring you no comfort. The laughter feels brittle, the talk too loud, the glances too frequent. You sit in the corner, hands folded, offering little. When the talk turns to politics or weather, you nod. But when it edges near whiskey, always half in jest, always with too much interest, you stiffen, your stomach turning to stone. The others notice your silence. You're sure of it, and you imagine them whispering later, saying you're too cautious, too secretive, that you must have something to hide. Perhaps they are right. The irony stings. You stay silent to protect yourself, but in silence you may well reveal more than you intend. The forest becomes your only confidant. You walk its paths in the twilight, listening to the rustle of leaves, the chatter of birds, the low burble of the creek. There at least you can breathe without fear of questions, though even in the woods you do not feel truly safe. Each snapped branch echoes too loudly. Each shadow between the trees seems to shift. One evening, after a day spent splitting wood and patching leaks at the still, you sit on the porch as the sun bleeds into the horizon. The road stretches away from your cabin, quiet and empty, but your eyes do not leave it. You watch for shapes that never come, footsteps that never sound, dust that never rises. The crickets hum, the cicadas drone, and the world around you continues. Yet you cannot shake the sense that something waits just beyond your sight. Your hand rests on your knee, fingers tapping in rhythm with your heart, and you realize you're no longer sure if this vigilance is protecting you or destroying you. You lean back, staring at the road, and wonder if you have become a man, guarding nothing but shadows. The longer you run liquor, the clearer it becomes that revenuers are not your only threat. If anything, their raids are occasional storms. You can watch the clouds gather, prepare for the downpour, and wait for it to pass. The greater danger lies closer to home, in men who are no different from you, scratching at thin soil and coaxing jars of whiskey from crooked stills. Every hollow hides a shack, every gulch a barrel, and every man who tends them knows that his survival depends on keeping others away. Competition is not an inconvenience here. It is a blood feud dressed in silence, where the price of trespassing is often death. The hills themselves seem to divide into territories, invisible boundaries marked not by fences but by whispered warnings. You know which creek belongs to a family 3 ridges over, which ridgeline hides the still of a cousin who will shoot even kin if pushed. Word passes quiet as smoke about who has claimed what hollow, and though no map exists, everyone understands the rules. You step beyond your ground at your peril. Men who cross those lines do not always return, and when they do, they carry scars to remind them. It is one thing to risk your life against fire or government. It is another to risk it against neighbours who smile at you on Sunday and sight down a rifle at you on Monday. Stories reach you with grim regularity. A man found floating face down in a creek, his hands bound, and his body marked with bruises too sharp to be from rocks. A shack dynamited in the night, its roof splintered, copper twisted into useless scrap. A family left without a father after he took a single jar too far down the wrong trail. These tales are told with a certain fatalism, as if violence were not tragedy, but weather, inevitable, expected, something you simply endure. Yet each one etches deeper into your mind, another reminder that secrecy and suspicion are not enough. You must also be ready to fight. You have never sought out conflict, but conflict has a way of seeking you. On a late afternoon, while hauling firewood near the shack, you notice movement on the ridge above. A figure, distant and half-hidden, watching too long before disappearing into the trees. You tell yourself it may have been a hunter or a lost traveller, but you know better. Men do not linger near another's still without reason. That night you return with your pistol heavy at your hip, eyes darting to every shadow, ears straining for every rustle. The still hisses and groans, as it always does. But now the noise feels like a beacon, calling attention to your presence. You cannot shake the thought of eyes fixed on you through the dark. Your family notices the change. Your wife studies the pistol on the table, the way your hand hovers near it, even at supper, but she does not ask. The children sense the tension too. growing quiet when the dogs bark, staring toward the woods with the same unease you feel. The cabin becomes another watchtower, its walls too thin to keep out the danger you imagine circling ever closer. You spend less time there, more time in the shack, as if by guarding the still directly, you can ward off what threatens it. Yet you know that vigilance is no shield against dynamite in the night, or a rifle shot from the tree line. The hollow grows darker with each passing week. A neighbour you once trusted meets your eyes for too long at church, and you wonder if he has heard whispers of your jars. Another man asks casually if you have seen smoke on the ridge, and you hear accusation buried in his words. Every interaction becomes a test, each handshake a chance for betrayal, each smile concealing the possibility of violence. You walk the paths with your head low, but your ears never rest, cataloguing every sound, every silence. The mountains feel crowded now, not with people you can see, but with threats you can feel pressing close. Once, while fetching water at dusk, you stumble on a patch of ground, torn black by fire. Charred boards lie scattered, and twisted copper gleams faintly in the last light. Someone still has been destroyed, its owner nowhere in sight. You crouch touching the cold metal, smelling the acrid ghost of smoke, and you know it could just as easily have been yours. The violence is not abstract any longer. It is a thing you can reach out and touch, proof that there are men in these hills who would rather burn another out than risk losing a sale. You rise and return home quickly, your steps quickened by the knowledge that you, too, are marked. Nights become the hardest. You lie on your cot, the children curled together on theirs, the fire guttering low, and you cannot surrender to sleep. The pistol rests beneath your pillow, its weight a constant reminder of what may come. Each creak of the cabin walls makes you hold your breath. Each call of a night bird makes you flinch. You imagine figures slipping through the trees, placing charges beneath the shack, levelling their rifles through the cracks in your walls. You hear phantom footsteps in the yard, the crunch of leaves where no one stands, the click of a hammer pulled back though no bullet follows. Your body stays taut as wire, every muscle ready, though the threat never materializes. In the shack the fear grows sharper still. The still hisses, the fire pops, and each sound could mask the approach of someone with violence in his heart. You work quickly, nervously, ears turned outward more than inward. A branch cracks outside and you freeze, pistol raised, eyes scanning the shadows. Nothing follows, but your hands shake as you return to work. Your breath ragged in your chest. You know this cannot last, that no man can remain coiled so tight without snapping. But you also know the alternative. To be careless, to be slow, to leave yourself open. That is how men are found in creeks, their hands bound, their bodies marked. Better madness than death, you tell yourself. Though in the dark you're not sure the two are different. The violence of the holler is not always loud. Sometimes it is only the silence of a neighbour no longer seen, the absence of a man's voice at church, the sudden appearance of a widow at market. Explanations are never given. Everyone knows better than to ask. Lives here vanish like smoke, and those left behind simply adjust, folding absence into the rhythm of survival. You wonder how long before your own absence would be met with the same weary acceptance, your family adjusting in silence as others have. The thought chills you more than the prospect of bullets or fire. One evening, after another long day of tending the still, you return to the cabin and find yourself staring at the children as they sleep. Their faces are soft, unmarked by the fear that grips you, and for a moment you feel shame at the world you have bound them to. You sit by the hearth, pistol on your knee, listening to the night outside. The woods are quiet, but you do not trust that quiet. Quiet is where danger hides, waiting for the moment you look away. You lean back, eyes fixed on the door, your ears straining for the sound of a footstep in the leaves. The fire pops, the cabin creaks, and your heart pounds as if each sound is the one that will finally break the silence with violence. That night you lie awake longer than usual, the cot hard beneath you, the pistol pressed close under your hand. You listen to the shifting of the timbers, the distant howl of a coyote, the faint rush of the creek. Each sound swells into a threat. Each silence grows heavier. Sleep never comes. Instead, you stare into the dark, waiting for men who may or may not arrive, ready to squeeze the trigger at the first sign of movement. In that hollow between fear and exhaustion, you realize that your life has become little more than this, guarding a crooked shack and a crooked trade, with nothing but suspicion and a trembling hand. The night stretches on, endless, and you remain wide-eyed, the pistol beneath your cot, listening for anyone who might approach the shack. Bullets and dynamite threaten your body, but the jars you carry down the trails do their own quiet killing. Your whiskey is harsh, clouded, strong enough to strip varnish from a table, but it sells because it is cheap. That has always been the lure. Coin is scarce in the hills, and men will buy whatever burns quickest and dulls the sharp edges of hunger. You do not lie to yourself about the quality. No one would call it smooth or clean, yet jars disappear as fast as you can make them, and money finds its way into your hands. The first time you saw it vanish into another man's mouth, you felt a flicker of pride. Corn turned to fire, fire turned to coin, coin turned to bread. The logic was unassailable, but the pride has long since faded, replaced by something you cannot name, something that feels like guilt but tastes more bitter, as though the smoke from your still lingers in your throat long after you've left the shack. You see the toll most clearly in town. A man leans heavy against a post outside the store, eyes glassy, words slurred, his jaw unshaven and his shirt hanging loose from shoulders grown too thin. You know the smell clinging to him. It is your work. Another staggers down the road, cursing at the ground, his boots scraping clumsily against the dust, until he falls into a ditch and lies there laughing like a child. Laughter should sound clean, but his rattles through rotting teeth, twisted by liquor into something hollow. You step past them quickly, not because you do not recognize them, but because you do. Their hands have taken your jars before, their coins pressed against your palm. The sight of them is a mirror you cannot bear to hold. Violence comes next, as it always does, when men drink past reason. You hear it at the barn dances, the way voices rise and crash into fists. A jug is passed from hand to hand, each mouth swallowing greedily, each mind dulling until the music itself turns sharp. Then the pushing begins, a careless shoulder, a jealous glance, an insult mumbled too low, but heard all the same. Blades flash, fists thud, and before the night is out, blood streaks the dirt. Sometimes the men stagger away, with broken noses and swollen eyes. Sometimes they do not stagger away at all. You hear of one young man, stabbed through the ribs, another bludgeoned with the butt of a rifle, both laid out stiff in their mothers' cabins by dawn. The fights are never traced to you, never named as your fault, but you know the whiskey that fueled them. Know the harsh burn that turned laughter to rage. The damage seeps into homes as well. You walk past cabins where shouts echo through thin walls, followed by the dull thud of fists and the sharp cries of children. A neighbour's wife arrives at church with bruises she cannot explain, her eyes downcast, her lips swollen. No one asks, for everyone already knows. Men stumble into stores with coin missing, having traded food for jars instead. Families grow thinner, their cupboards bare, while fathers sit slumped in corners, red-eyed and slack-jawed. You watch the children, their ribs sharp, their eyes wide and hungry, and you know your jars are among the causes. Whiskey may buy bread for your own table, but it robs bread from theirs. The irony curdles in your gut, leaving you restless, even when you hold coin in your hand. You try to tell yourself that it would happen regardless. If not your liquor, then someone else's. The hills are full of stills, smoke curling from a dozen hidden shacks. But the argument rings hollow each time you see another man stumble blind from bad liquor, his eyes clouded forever by a run gone wrong. You remember the warnings. The first drips from the still are poison, dangerous enough to ruin a man's sight, his mind, his life. You have always set them aside, but not everyone bothers, not everyone cares. Cheap jars flood the holler, and the desperate drink whatever burns their throat. Consequences, be damned. You tell yourself your own whiskey is safer than most. Yet safety is a relative word. A man who drinks himself blind has little use for knowing the name of the one who sold him the jar. The community that sustains you is the same one you poison, and the contradiction gnaws. At church you watch the preacher grow louder in his sermons, railing against sin and spirits, his eyes flicking toward faces he knows too well. You sit among them, head bowed, hearing his words fall like stones. He speaks of families wrecked, of fathers lost to drink, of the devil's work seeping into the valley. The hymns that follow ring sharp, less like praise than like a plea for deliverance. You join in quietly, mouthing words without sound, aware that half the congregation has drunk from your jars and the other half prays against them. You are not sure which group damns you more. At night you sit by the fire, the children asleep, your wife mending clothes by the glow of the flames. The coins earned from whiskey sit in a tin beneath the floorboard, safe but not clean. You think of the faces you've seen, men stumbling, women bruised, children hungry, and you wonder how long the trade can continue before it consumes everyone. Your wife does not ask where the money comes from, but you see the knowledge in her eyes, the way her jaw tightens when you hand her another bill for sugar or flour. She knows, and she carries the weight silently, just as you do. It binds you both in a pact of necessity that neither of you can escape. The worst moments are when desperation takes shape before your eyes. A man comes to you one evening, his hands trembling, his breath sour with old drink. He begs for a jar, though his coin is short, offering instead a knife, a jacket, anything he can spare. His voice cracks as he speaks, his eyes wide with the hunger of addiction. You want to refuse him, to tell him to go back to his cabin, to sober himself before his children forget the sound of his steady voice. But you see the fever in his gaze, the way his body leans toward the promise of liquor, and you know that refusal might only send him to another man still. Against your better judgment, you take his offer, though the shame settles heavy in your gut. Each sail begins to feel less like survival and more like complicity. You walk the trails with jars hidden in burlap, feeling as though every step carries you deeper into a pit you cannot climb out of. The forest watches, its silence accusing, its branches reaching overhead like judgmental arms. You imagine the faces of those who will drink from your jars, the families who will suffer, and you tell yourself it is for your own children, for their bread, their shoes, their future. Yet the argument never fully convinces. Survival feels hollow when it comes at the cost of another man's ruin. Eventually your work catches up to you. It begins as a whisper in your own head, an awareness that the walls are closing tighter. Your jars spread further than you can control, traded and passed on until strangers drink from them. Each stranger is another chance for your name to reach ears you would rather it never reach. You start to measure every exchange, not just in coin, but in risk. When you hand a jar to a cousin, you wonder if he might be calculating the worth of your trust against the reward money. When you give another to a neighbour, you wonder if his wife's swollen eyes will one day drive him to make a bargain. Even friends you once trusted now look dangerous when they lean too close. You know the government pays, and in these hills, a few dollars can carry more weight than loyalty ever did. The stories are always the same. A man hauled down the road in chains because someone pointed the way. A still smashed to pieces, while the revenuers laughed, their guides smirking in the shadows. Informants vanish afterward, some moving away, some merely staying quiet, but their silence speaks loudly enough. No one ever admits to it, but everyone knows. Betrayal is as much a currency here as whiskey, and no man is too close, no kin too dear, to be exempt. You tell yourself you will be vigilant, that you will see the signs before they strike, but the signs are always subtle until they are too late. One evening, as the sun sinks low and the crickets begin their endless song, you hear dogs barking on the ridge. At first it is faint, easy enough to dismiss as a neighbour's hounds chasing a coon, but then the sound sharpens, carries differently, steady and organised. These are not the playful calls of hunting dogs. These are trained, baying in unison, moving with purpose. You freeze on the path, the sack on your back suddenly heavier, your body rooted in dread. The forest stills around you, birds silent, leaves trembling only with the passage of those unseen hounds. You know at once what it means. Someone has spoken. You hurry to the shack, every step a jolt of panic, ears straining for how close the barking has grown. Your breath comes harsh, ragged, but you dare not slow. Branches claw at your arms, roots threaten to trip you. The sack slams against your spine, and still you force your legs forward. The gulch feels both too close and too far, as if you're running straight into a trap laid for you. Each snap of a twig behind you is a gun cocked, each gust of wind through the brush a shout of pursuit. By the time you stumble into the clearing, your shirt clings to you with sweat, and your chest burns with fire hotter than any you light beneath the kettle. Inside the shack the still sits, silent and hulking, copper belly gleaming faintly in the dim light. It looks suddenly monstrous, less like a tool of survival than a beacon summoning ruin. You drop the sack with a thud and seize the tools. There is no time to think, only to act. You wrench at the joints, scrape flour paste from seams, spill mash into the dirt, all in frantic silence. The copper hisses faintly as it cools, mocking your clumsy haste. Each sound of your labour feels loud enough to carry to the ridge, where the dogs bay, loud enough to draw their handlers straight to you. You work faster, hands trembling, every movement jerky and desperate. The shack fills with the sour reek of spilled mash, thick and suffocating. It coats your tongue, clings to your skin, burns your eyes until you can hardly see. You curse under your breath, but the words do nothing to slow your racing thoughts. If they find the still intact, there is no argument, no plea, no chance of mercy. If they find only copper scattered and barrels broken, perhaps you can claim ignorance. Perhaps you can vanish into the trees before they know it was you. Perhaps. But each strike of your hand against wood, each scrape of metal against earth, reminds you that perhaps is a fragile hope when men with rifles and dogs are closing in. Your mind conjures faces as you work. Was it the cousin who laughed too easily when he asked after your fields? Was it the neighbour whose son stumbled drunk into church last week, his wife's eyes hollow with shame? Was it the man who begged you for another jar, his bills trembling in his hand? Any one of them, all of them, none of them. It hardly matters now. The betrayal is real. The dogs prove it, and the names are only ghosts gnawing at the edges of your mind. You want to hate them, but the truth is more bitter. You might have done the same if the coin had been offered to you at the wrong moment. Hunger bends men in ways that principle cannot resist. The barking grows louder, carrying down the ridge, bouncing through the trees. You fumble with the last pipe, wrenching it free with hands slick with sweat. The copper clatters, and you wince at the sound, certain it echoes for miles. You kick dirt over the fire pit, smearing the embers into mud, coughing as smoke rises into your face. The shack is chaos now. Boards pulled apart, barrels spilled, copper strewn in pieces across the floor. You stare at it for a moment, chest heaving, and tell yourself it is enough. It has to be enough. The dogs are closer now, their voices cutting sharper through the dusk. You gather what you can, shoving tools into the sack, pushing copper beneath rotting boards, anything to make the place look abandoned. Your hands move of their own accord, frantic, fumbling, as your ears fix on the sound of pursuit. Your heart hammers in time with the baying. Your breath comes in ragged gasps, and you know that if they crest the ridge now, you will have no time left. You drop to your knees in the dirt, fingers still working, eyes wild. The forest looms outside the doorway, every shadow a figure, every rustle a revenuer waiting to step forward. You press paste across the last seam, not to seal it but to smear it into nothingness, to make it look like a ruin rather than a still. The smell of sour mash fills your lungs, choking you, but you force yourself to keep going. If you stop even for a breath, you may as well lay your hands out for the irons. You crouch in the shack's wreckage, heart pounding, the baying of the dogs drawing closer until the sound fills the hollow like a curse. You smear the last paste across the broken seams, praying the ruins will be enough to fool them, but even as you work, you know you're finished. The dogs do not bay without cause. They have your scent, your trail, and the men behind them have no need for subtlety now. When the crash of boots through undergrowth shakes the trees, when voices bark orders too sharp to mistake, you drop your tools and stumble into the woods, but it is already too late. Shadows surge through the doorway, rifles gleam in the gloom, and before you can draw breath, a hand clamps on your arm and wrenches you to the ground. The dirt rises sharp against your cheek, the taste of copper thick in your mouth. Chains bite your wrists, cold and certain, and the dogs circle, snapping and snarling as the revenuers laugh. They march you out of the gulch without pause, dragging you stumbling up the ridge, your arms pinioned tight behind you. The forest you know so well offers no shelter, only the long echo of hounds and men. Neighbours gather along the road as you're hauled toward town, their eyes wide, their mouths set in hard lines. Some look away, unwilling to meet your gaze. Others stare openly, as though watching a warning come to life. You keep your head down, but you feel their judgment heavy as stone. Children cling to mothers' skirts as you pass, their whispers trailing behind you like knives. You do not see your wife or children in the crowd, but you imagine their faces all the same, eyes wide, mouths trembling, watching the man they depend on marched away in irons. The trial follows swiftly. There is no time for explanations, no patience for pleas. You are led into a cramped courthouse, where the air smells of ink and sweat, your boots clanking against the wooden floorboards. The judge sits high, gavel poised, his face unreadable, but his eyes sharp. Papers shuffle, words are read aloud, charges of illicit distilling, of defying federal law, of corrupting the community with your jars. The revenuer who caught you speaks of vigilance and duty, his voice polished for the record. You stand silent, your shoulders bent beneath the eyes of the room. Your voice would make no difference here. You already know the verdict. When you're asked to speak, you try. The words come halting, your throat dry, your voice cracking as you speak of hunger, of land too poor to yield enough, of children who needed bread more than laws written in some distant city. You speak of necessity, not greed of survival, not defiance. The words fall heavy, but they do not land where you hope. The judge listens with a face of stone, his gavel tapping once, twice, as if impatient for the end. When you finish, silence follows, broken only by the scratch of the clerk's pen. The judgment is passed down without pause, a fine far beyond what you could ever pay, and when the impossibility of payment is clear, the sentence of prison follows. Your knees weaken, but the chains hold you upright. They lock you away in a cell with iron bars and stone walls that sweat with damp. The nights are endless there, the air heavy with the stink of men crammed too close, their voices echoing low and bitter. Some shout curses into the dark, others weep quietly. Most sit silent as you do, staring at the floor. You count the days by the slant of light through the window, a thin slice that moves too quickly and too slow at once. Your body aches from the hard cot, your stomach shrinks from the meagre rations, But worse than hunger or pain is the knowledge of absence. You imagine your wife at the cabin, your children's questions, their bellies gnawing, the silence of the table without you there. The punishment reaches far beyond the cell, gnawing at those you left behind more deeply than it gnaws at you. When at last they release you, you are not free so much as discarded. Your sentence served, your debt unpaid but unpayable, you are handed back your tattered clothes and led out into the light. The world outside has not changed, yet you have. You feel smaller, bent, a man hollowed by the walls that held you. In town, faces turn as you walk past. Some look on with pity, others with contempt, but none with the ease of before. You are marked now, your name carried in whispers, your reputation stained. Work will be hard to find. Trust harder still. You are a moonshiner who was caught, and that will never leave you. The walk back to your hollow is long, each step heavy with the weight of shame. When you reach the cabin, the children cling to you with wide eyes, your wife pressing her lips tight to hide the worry carved deep in her face. The walls look the same, the yard the same, but the silence inside is different. You know they survived without you, barely, scraping by on what little they could. The tin of coins you once kept hidden beneath the floor is gone, spent on what food they could buy, but hunger lingers still. The questions in their eyes go unspoken, but you hear them clearly. What now? The land does not forgive. It never has. You rise before dawn and walk to the rows where corn should stand, but the stalks are stunted, their leaves yellowing, their ears too thin to matter. The soil, rocky and reluctant, yields little no matter how many hours you bend your back against it. Rain comes too late, or too hard, washing seed away instead of feeding it. The weeds seem stronger than the crops, choking what little grows. Each season repeats the same cruel joke: work without reward, sweat without sustenance. You return home with a basket lighter than it should be, and your wife counts kernels with careful eyes, stretching each handful to fill another meal. Winter tightens the noose further. Frost creeps down from the ridges, seeping into the cabin walls until your children huddle together for warmth, their breath rising in pale clouds. The fire never seems large enough, no matter how much wood you split, and the stew thins more each night. The money you brought back after your release is already gone, swallowed by flour and salt, and coin does not regenerate in the dark months. Hunger stalks you like a revenuer's hound, patient and tireless. Each morning you wake with your ribs sharper than before, your stomach hollow and gnawing, your hands shaking as you split another stick of kindling. You tell yourself you will not return to the still, not after what you endured. You say the words silently as you patch the roof of the cabin, as you scrape ice from the well, as you dig potatoes from frozen ground. You repeat them at night when you lie awake, staring at the rafters, listening to your children stir in uneasy sleep. But the words wear thin, fraying with each passing day. Necessity is louder than memory. The land offers nothing but reminders that pride cannot be boiled into broth, that honour cannot be ground into meal. By the time the snow recedes, the choice is no longer a choice. It is inevitability dressed in silence. The shack in the gulch waits for you like a grave you cannot avoid. You walk there in the grey light of dawn, your boots sinking in thawing mud, your breath clouding in the cold air. The boards groan when you push open the door, as though recognising the weight of your return. You kneel among the copper, and your hands move without thought. Paste is mixed, seams are patched, barrels are reset. The motions are as familiar as breathing. When the mash begins again, the sour reek fills the shack, seeping into your skin, clinging to your hair. The smell is almost a comfort now, though it should revolt you. It signals survival, even if survival is poisoned. You stir the bubbling mass, listening to it hiss and froth, and you feel a grim familiarity in the sound. It is the voice of your trade, your inheritance, your curse. You wait the necessary days, ears tuned to the bubbling like a midwife listening for a child's first cries. When it is ready, you light the fire with hands steadier than you expected. Fear lingers, yes, but it has dulled, worn down by repetition and necessity. The still hisses, the copper groans, and steam curls upward into the dim air. You tell yourself each run will be the last, that you only need enough to carry the family through another season, another winter. But even as you whisper it, you know it is a lie. There is never enough. The land ensures it. The ridges and hollows see to it that the soil will not yield enough corn, that the winters will not pass without gnawing hunger, that the only harvest worth tending is whiskey. You see other men caught in the same trap, neighbours, cousins, strangers in town who trade jars as quietly as you do. None of them speak of escape. They only speak of how to endure another day, another year, another generation. The irony of it curdles in your chest. You once believed whiskey offered freedom, a way to step beyond the soil's refusal, beyond the government's taxes. But the jars have not freed you. They have chained you tighter. You are bound not just to the still, but to the cycle it represents, a wheel that grinds down fathers and sons alike. You find yourself glancing over your shoulder more than ever, and you still think you hear the sound of dogs in the night sometimes, but no one comes. The revenuer can break your shack, the judge can humiliate you, but neither has the power to change the hunger that always drives you back here. It is not rebellion that keeps you tending the fire. It is the hollow belly of your child, the quiet desperation of your wife, the silence of a field that will never yield enough. You sit in the shack one evening, the fire low, the steam rising in faint wisps. The copper belly glows in the dim light, sweat dripping down your temples as you crouch close. Outside, the creek murmurs. The trees stand silent. The world holds its breath. You stare at the trickle of liquor, the clear stream falling into the jar, and you feel no triumph, no pride, only resignation. You are not the first to sit here, and you will not be the last. The cycle will outlast you, swallowing another generation as surely as it swallowed you. The steam curling upward from the still becomes a familiar sight, a presence so constant it feels less like smoke than breath. Night after night you crouch by the kettle, listening to the hiss wiping sweat from your brow, filling jars that bring food to the table, and yet never enough to ease the hunger fully. At first the rhythm is tolerable, even comforting, but years grind down even the strongest men, and you were never strong to begin with. The work does not relent. It takes its payment from your body, coin by coin, until you're left hollowed out. Your hands are the first to betray you. Once they were steady, strong enough to guide an axe or mend a joint in the copper without faltering. Now they tremble, even when you're not holding tools. You smear flour paste along the seams and watch it spread unevenly, because your fingers will not obey you. You light matches and struggle to keep them still long enough to touch the wood. Some days you fumble a jar, and it shatters against the ground, clear liquid spilling like a wasted harvest. Your breath caught in your throat as you curse your own weakness. The still does not forgive clumsiness, and each mistake tightens the knot of fear in your gut. Your lungs follow soon after. The smoke from countless fires clings to them like tar, heavy and suffocating. You wheeze when you climb the ridges now, pausing often to clutch a tree while your chest burns. At night you cough until your ribs ache, the sound rasping through the cabin, waking your wife and sending the children into uneasy silence. You pretend it is only a cold, a passing sickness, but you know better. The air in the shack has settled inside you, the sour stench of mash and the acrid bite of smoke carved into your flesh. You're as much a part of the still as the copper and wood, and it is killing you slowly. The endless damp of the wood stiffens your joints, grinding your movements into painful hesitation. Each morning you rise slower. Each evening you limp heavier back to the cabin. Your back aches so fiercely you sometimes cannot straighten it, leaving you hunched like an old man, though your hair has not yet gone fully grey. The ground beneath your boots feels heavier, the trails longer, the sacks of corn unbearable, though once you carried them without thought. Each step is a reminder that your body no longer belongs to you, but to the toil that has claimed it. Meanwhile, the trade moves on without mercy. Younger men take the routes you once walked, their legs quick, their lungs unspoiled, their nerves sharp. They shoulder jars with ease, their laughter echoing in the woods as if they are invincible. You watch them from a distance sometimes, remembering when you too believed you could outrun hunger, fire, and law alike. They nod at you respectfully enough, but their eyes already look past you. You're no longer a rival or a partner, merely an old man limping through their territory, surviving on scraps. The holler has no place for those who cannot keep pace. The buyers change too. Where once men sought you out, waiting quietly at crossroads or barns, now they drift toward others, younger and hungrier, willing to sell for less. The jars you carry weigh heavier, not just in your arms, but in their refusal. Men shake their heads, muttering that your whiskey is too harsh, that another's burns cleaner. You bite down the words that rise in your throat, knowing they are right, that your trembling hands and weary lungs cannot tend the still as carefully as before. You return home with jars still heavy in your sack, the clinking mocking you with each step. The coin you hoped for never arrives, and your family feels the pinch again, thin meals stretching thinner. Your wife sees it plainly. Her eyes linger on you longer, her jaw set in that quiet way that means worry she will not speak aloud. She mends your shirts with patches that seem to multiply faster than cloth can cover. She ladles thinner soup, dividing it carefully so the children have more than you. You pretend not to notice, though the gnawing in your stomach tells you she has already begun sacrificing her own share as well. The children's laughter fades, their voices subdued, their questions rare. You have not only weakened yourself, but them too, and the knowledge cuts deeper than any revenuer's chain. The seasons grind past, each one heavier than the last. Winters leave you gasping by the fire, unable to split enough wood to keep the cabin warm. Summers leave you drenched in sweat, your body too frail to carry the corn in from the fields. The shack in the gulch becomes both your refuge and your prison. You drag yourself there even when your body protests, knowing that without the jars, you cannot hope to endure. You crouch before the fire, coughing, shaking, smearing paste with hands that will not stay steady. Each time the copper hisses, you flinch, certain this will be the run that ends you. Yet you return again and again, because the holler does not grant mercy to those who stop. You feel the change inside you more than you can explain. Some mornings you spit into the dirt, and the phlegm is streaked red. You wipe your mouth quickly, hiding it from your wife, but the taste of iron lingers no matter how hard you swallow. The blood returns again and again, in coughs that bend you double, in gasps that leave you weak for hours. Your chest rattles when you breathe, a hollow sound like wind in a cracked barrel. You begin to wonder if the still will kill you, not in fire, but in slow suffocation, each breath thinner than the last until one day there is none left. The men who once shared your trade no longer glance your way. Their laughter carries on the wind, sharp and bright, as though you were already gone. Buyers pass you over, their eyes shifting toward younger sellers with firmer hands. Even the revenuers seem uninterested now. They look past you in town, hunting larger fish, more dangerous men. You have become invisible, and in some ways invisibility feels like mercy, but it also feels like erasure, as though the years you have spent hunched over fires and jars amount to nothing more than smoke that vanished on the wind. One evening, returning from the shack with your chest raw and your legs trembling, You stumble and fall hard against the earth. The jar in your sack shatters, soaking you in the sharp reek of whiskey. You roll to your side, coughing so violently that blood spatters the dirt in dark flecks. Your vision blurs, the trees sway above you, and for a long moment you cannot rise. You lie in the dirt for a long while, coughing. Eventually, you stand and you manage to make it back home. You convince yourself that you're fine, but deep down you know it isn't true. You tell yourself that you will go back to the shack tomorrow for one more haul of whiskey, just enough to keep the bills at bay for a while longer. The next morning, the dirt outside the shack is still marked with red from last night's coughing, a stain that does not wash away in the dew. Your chest feels heavy, your head thick, but you rise before the ridge lightens anyway. Winter gnaws again at the cabin, the cupboard rattles hollow, and your wife's silence speaks louder than hunger itself. You limp back down into the gulch where the shack slouches against the stream. Each step toward the shack feels like it might be your last, but you take it anyway. The boards sag when you push the door, the roof leaks where rain has had its way, and the still waits in its corner like an old beast. Copper dulled, seams patched, belly dented, it looks as tired as you feel. You press your hand against the metal and feel the chill of it seep into your palm. The metal thinner than you remember, fragile where it should be strong. Your fingers trace the line of the seam you have always feared, the one you have sworn 100 times to replace. You smear new paste across it anyway, whispering to yourself that it will hold, that you will keep the fire small, that you have learned enough not to tempt fate again. The mash stinks as you siphon it, sour and clinging, the smell coating your throat before you even set the kettle. You work by instinct now, muscles remembering what your mind no longer wants to think through. The jars line up neatly on the shelf, waiting, their mouths open like hungry birds. You crouch low, strike the match, and cup it to the kindling. The flame shivers in the draught, catching slow, and smoke curls upward, thin at first, then thicker, dark against the grey morning. You feed the fire in small handfuls, listening to the faint throb inside the kettle, feeling the old rhythm settle into place. Pressure builds the way it always does. The copper groans. The kettle moans. You bend close, ear to the pipe, listening for the betrayals you've heard too many times before. The seam whispers faintly, a sound like a snake tucked in the walls. You dab at it with paste, hands trembling, spreading it unevenly, but praying it will be enough. The shack fills with steam, the sourness of the mash thick and suffocating. Sweat runs down your temples, soaking into your shirt, and you cough hard enough to feel the rattle in your ribs. Red spatters the dirt at your feet, bright against the dark. You ignore it. Your eyes are on the fire, on the copper, on the seam that never quite lies quiet. The woods outside are silent. No dogs, no men, no threats but the one in front of you. You take some grim comfort in that. No revenuer, no rival, no cousin waiting to betray you. Only the still, your oldest enemy, and your only companion, hissing at you like it has from the beginning. You lean closer, rag in one hand, paste in the other, and mutter a prayer that is less a plea than a habit. You think you can coax it one more time, that you can hold it together just long enough to fill the jars and stumble home with coin to keep your family alive another week. The hiss sharpens without warning, a jet of vapour cutting the air, brushing cold against your cheek. You lunge forward with the rag, desperate to smother it, but your hand shakes, the rag slips, and the edge kisses the fire. Flame does not leap, it blooms. The air ripens in an instant, blooming with invisible fuel, and before you can draw another breath, the world becomes white. Light smashes through the shack, blinding, deafening, flattening, and the pressure lifts you from the ground like a toy. Wood snaps like twigs, copper tears like cloth, and the fire blossoms outward in a single roaring breath. You crash against the dirt outside, heat crawling over you, smoke clawing into your lungs. The skin on your arms shines wet and raw, your shirt blackened and curling where it clings. You try to rise, but your hands buckle, shaking and half melted, and the ground accepts you again. You cough once, twice, iron flooding your mouth until it dribbles into the soil. The trees above tilt and sway, their branches blurring in the heat. The shack burns behind you, a furnace consuming itself, beams falling inward as the roof caves with a groan that sounds almost like laughter. The air smells of ash, copper, and cooked flesh, and you know that smell is you. Your thoughts scatter as quickly as the boards breaking in the fire. You think of your wife's hands, raw from work, folding dough too thin to rise. You think of your children's eyes wide in the dim light of the cabin, watching you lace your boots with questions they never ask. Your chest seizes when you try to breathe, and the world narrows to the dirt beneath your face, dark flecked with your blood. You want to push yourself up, to stagger, to fight for one more step, but the fire behind you roars louder than your heartbeat, and you understand that you will not rise. The gulch, the shack, the still, they have claimed you finally, and the trade you thought you depended on turns its face away as if you had never mattered. By evening, the fire has eaten everything it can. The copper lies twisted and useless among the ash, the boards charred to brittle flakes, the jars shattered into glinting shards. The creek keeps murmuring, the trees stand the same, and the ridge looks no different than it did yesterday. Smoke rises steady through the canopy, curling up in a ribbon that drifts and dissolves into the indifferent sky. Before long, another man will follow the same trail, dragging copper into the hollow, muttering the same vows of caution. He will light his fire and tell himself he will outlast the circle. The jars will flow again, and no one will speak your name. The smoke curls higher,